Welcome to our 64th monthly Zoom presentation. As we work through our 6th year of Zoom SCA presentations, we can all be very proud of the amazing library of recordings we are building. It's truly a testament to the diversity of the roadside. I am Brian Gallagher, the president of the Society for Commercial Archaeology, and proud to be your host for tonight's presentation. Welcome to all our guests and to any new people we have with us this afternoon and evening. And a warm hello to members of the National Amusement Park Historical Association, the International Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions, and the Themed Entertainment Association. We're happy you took the time to watch an SCA presentation. I hope you enjoy the show. And for anybody watching the recording of this episode of the SCA's monthly presentations who is not a member of the SCA, we earnestly ask you to consider joining. Funding for the various activities of the SCA comes almost exclusively from our membership. Just visit our website at www.sca-roadside.org and follow the links. Now I have the pleasure of introducing tonight's presenter. Steve Spiegel will be telling us tonight about the history of neon in the Disney theme parks around the world. Learn when neon first appeared in Disney parks and how the medium influenced park architecture, visitor experience, and overall storytelling. Steven Spiegel is an executive story lead for Walt Disney Imagineering. He began his career with the Walt Disney Company in 1990 and has had the pleasure of writing such diverse projects as Honey, I Shrunk the Audience, which is at Epcot, Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout, California Adventure, and Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind, which is at Epcot. Steve is also a founding member of Signs United, an international community of vintage sign hunters, enthusiasts, and preservationists. He is currently on the board of directors for both the Museum of Neon Art and the Society for Commercial Archaeology. So Steve, if you'd like to start sharing your screen, we're ready for you. Okay, you're ready to go.
All right. Here we go. Everybody seeing that all right?
Yeah, we can see it perfectly.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Brian. I'm very excited to talk to you about the history of neon in the Disney parks. But first, many people ask me what my title means. Well, basically, I'm a dimensional storyteller. You see, in the theme parks, we tell stories as guests move through them in a fully dimensional, immersive spaces. And believe me, that's a unique, challenging, and if you do it right, ultimately extremely rewarding way to tell a story. And I've been doing it for 35 years. I've had the opportunity, as you mentioned in my intro, to work on such diverse projects as Honey, I Shrunk the Audience, 3D movie, Star Tours, The Adventures Continues, which is a simulator attraction, Turtle Talk with Crush, which is an extremely interactive experience where guests get to talk to Crush the Turtle from Finding Nemo in real time. And lately, I've had the opportunity to be the story lead for all our Marvel projects, from the Iron Man experience in Hong Kong to the Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout and Web Slingers, a Spider-Man adventure here at Avengers Campus at Disney California Adventure, and my newest project, Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind for Epcot. And I'm also a photographer whose main focus is vintage signage, especially neon. And you can find me on Instagram as Color by Spiegel. In fact, I'm one of the founding members of Signs United, an international community of vintage sign hunters, photographers, fine artists, enthusiasts, and preservationists. We even have members who make miniature signs and sign-shaped cookies. We are obsessed in a good way. And as Brian said, I'm also on the board of our very own SCA, as well as the Museum of Neon Art here in Glendale, California. So when the Society for Commercial Archaeology asked me to do this Zoom talk on how we use neon to tell story in the Disney parks, my two worlds literally came together in a perfect Venn diagram. And when I got to thinking about it, creating a neon sign is a lot like what we do at Walt Disney Imagineering, a marrying of art and science. This neon museum here in Glendale. Actually, the Museum of Neon Art in Glendale graciously let me shoot neon bender Lyle George while he was teaching a class. And it's true. What we do at Imagineering is a combo of art and technology and even animation. Plus, I found an interesting parallel between the Walt Disney Studios and the history of neon in the US. Walt Disney opened his second studio in Los Angeles in 1926 at the very beginning of the rise of neon in the US. In fact, it's purported that the very first neon sign in America appeared in Los Angeles in 1923. So just 3 years later, Disney put this amazing sign on top of his new studio. Here it is up close. We can see in this close-up that the company who made the sign was QRS Neon, a company I know many of you know. I see Heather David and Kathy Kickert out there, and I know you're familiar with them. As far as we know, there are no color photos that feature this rooftop sign. But I recently learned that people over at Walt Disney Feature Animation had an appreciation of this sign and wanted to get it remade and hung inside the Disney Feature Animation building. But with no color photos, they worked with neon artist Lily Lakich and did some detective work. And here's what they came up with. It's scaled down to about 6 foot by 8 foot, but still very impressive. And the studio felt that reproducing this historic Disney neon sign would be a great way to pay homage to their history. Of course, that rooftop sign predated Disneyland by 30 years, but it shows that the company has had a long connection with neon. Now I'm thrilled to share with you my research on neon in the Disney parks. As I said before, what we Imagineers do is tell stories in a dimensional world, and in most cases, our guests are the heroes of the story. This differs from going to a movie and watching the story unfold for others. Storytelling in a dimensional world means directing the guest's attention to where you want them to look because they are walking or riding through this place and they can choose to look anywhere they want. That's why we want to immerse you in each land using the architecture, the music, the sound effects, the costumes, and yes, the lighting. So I'm going to show you how we used and continue to use neon in our parks and where we don't use it and why. And when I began to research this subject, I thought I would find some mid-century examples of neon inside Disneyland, but I was actually wrong. The first neon sign I actually found was this, the Disneyland Hotel, which opened a few months after the park in 1955. But the tower was added in 1962. The neon was up on that tower from 63 until 1999. And yes, this was the Disneyland Hotel, not the Hotel Disneyland, but due to the spacing with the outdoor elevator, the neon signage read Hotel Disneyland until the building expanded in 1966. And here we see the expanded building a few years later with the hotel name now in the correct order. And if you're wondering just how tall those letters are, let me show you. This is the actual D from the original Disneyland Hotel. That's me next to it for scale. The iconic D is 16 feet tall, 9 feet wide. It was auctioned off a few years ago from a private collector, and I was able to attend this auction and watch it sell for $80,000 to some guy named David Copperfield. All right. Of course, Main Street, USA is the first land that guests encounter as they enter the park. But because of Disney storytellers' attention to detail, you won't find any neon here. Why? Well, this is a street based on Walt's hometown and set at the turn of the last century. And that's why there's a mix of early automobiles and horse-drawn carriages. And that's why, with an abundance of signage, it is all hand-painted or lit by incandescent bulbs, such as these bulbs we see in the open pan channel letter forms. And of course, the famous windows of Main Street are a nod to those hand-painted signs that second and third floor businesses would use to advertise their shops or services. Of course, I'm sure most of you know that many of the proprietors of those hand-painted window signs are former Disney employees. It's a great honor within the company to have a Main Street window dedicated to you. And there's wooden hanging signs, all types that would have been seen in towns across America in the early 20th century. But neon didn't appear in the scene, as we said, until the early 20s. And as Walt Disney was born in 1901, his childhood would take us right to the beginning of World War I, around 1918. So No neon here. And there never will be. But why didn't I find any neon at all in the original Disneyland? Well, by the time Disneyland opened in 1955, neon use was declining, and many cities even discouraged neon sign construction with ordinances. Nelson Aldrin titled his 1947 collection of short stories The Neon Wilderness, and that was not as a positive. Post World War II, neon was beginning its slow decline, culminating with First Lady Lady Bird Johnson's so-called Highway Beautification Project in 1965. And that didn't ban, but definitely encouraged the removal of neon signage across the country. Remember in the classic film It's a Wonderful Life, one of the nightmare scenarios for Jimmy Stewart's character if he had never been born was that his idyllic little town of Bedford Falls, not unlike Disneyland's Main Street, would become a neon nightmare of bars and dance halls called Pottersville. Well, the movie came out in 1947, just a few years before Disneyland opened, and this was the growing mentality towards neon at the time. I mean, in just 2 decades, neon went from romantic to blight, with the anti-neon sentiment growing. It's understandable that the powers that be would not want any neon in the park. After all, Walt wanted his guests to leave today behind and enter the world of yesterday, tomorrow, and fantasy. Now, speaking of tomorrow, I wasn't expecting neon in the original 1955 Disneyland, but from the beginning of my research, my attention was on Tomorrowland for finding the first neon sign inside the park. The original 1955 Tomorrowland had no neon whatsoever, but I figured the 67 redo would be a sea of neon, but not so. Googie, yes. If there was neon, it was hiding behind plastic signage, and I realize now that 67 was right in the midst of that highway beautification anti-neon time period. So I was on the search for the first neon sign that really celebrated the neon tubes. So to the best of my knowledge and research, this was the first neon sign inside Disneyland. The Starcade, 1977. And of course, it makes sense that the first neon sign in Disneyland would appear in Tomorrowland. Neon's glow often gives a futuristic feel, especially when paired with those amazing letter forms. The Starcade opened with Space Mountain that year, and it was around this time period that neon, thanks to the disco era, was beginning to make a comeback. And even though Starcade is no longer open, the sign remains. I took this in the next video last year, and you can see they still light it, and even though some of the tubes are out, it's just beautiful. I just love that combo of 70s and sci-fi letter forms. Unfortunately, it took another decade before another neon sign was added to Disneyland. And here it is, 1987. Along with the opening of Star Tours, the former Tomorrowland character shop needed to be refreshed and themed to go along with the brand new Star Tours attraction that was about to open. This story comes straight from my former colleague, now retired Imagineer Tom Morris, who was the creative director on this. He wanted to do something special for the Star Trader merch location, but all the money for facades was going to Star Tours, the ride. So, with little money left to re-theme the character shop, he opted for a minimalist graphic approach, along with the name change to Star Traders. Now, we're in the mid-80s now, and Tom started to become aware of neon because it was being revived in use, especially by artists. And he liked some of the new art he was seeing working with neon, and the color palette of choices seemed to be growing more sophisticated. But when Tom proposed using neon, there was a lot of resistance. They feared turning Disneyland into a second-rate Vegas, so many were skeptical, and that anti-neon sentiment was still hanging on. But fortunately, Tom stuck to his guns and came up with an idea he pitched to add animation to the front of the building and quickly drew a sketch of a Spaceman Mickey 9-step animation sequence. Not having an animation background, he took the sketch to Disney Animation, where he worked with animator Mark Henn to clean up the sketch. And there he is in all his glory, lighting up the path in Tomorrowland. It has truly become a beloved part of the park. And Tom says that people even send him pictures of their Spaceman Mickey tattoos. Here's a little bit of video highlighting the animation sequence. Most importantly, this shifted the company's attitude towards neon in the parks and paved the way for even more neon. including the addition of these crackle neon plasma towers to the Star Tours facade. The crackle and the glow really give the Star Tours building so much energy. And like Spaceman Mickey, it remains a Tomorrowland fixture. And here's the tower on the other side of the park, which is now Buzz Lightyear. And you can see a little bit of how that crackle neon plasma plays together and gives us so much energy and activation and animation. Around 2012, Tomorrowland had some retrofuturism aided by this beautiful neon script and mid-century graphic stylized car. We can also see some circular neon decorative tubes highlighting the area. Tomorrowland train station glows in the background, so even with a vintage steam train, the station tells you are not in Frontierland anymore. But through the magic of Disney, by the next stop, you're back at Main Street Station with its wooden hand-painted signage back at the turn of the century. There's an example of more futuristic use of neon in Tomorrowland, but this one is in Orlando's Walt Disney World Tomorrowland. I love the wordplay too. And speaking of Florida, as we venture out to some of our other parks, we will find more instances of neon, not used for futurism, but nostalgia. Disney's Hollywood Studios Main Street is Hollywood Boulevard, but it's an idealized Hollywood Boulevard circa 1940s, 1950s. Many of you will recognize the signs and buildings from Los Angeles history, especially that building at the end of the street. The park opened in 1989, and the weenie or castle of that park is the Chinese Theater reproduction that formerly housed the Great Movie Ride. Imagineers used the original blueprints to reconstruct this spot-on replica. Now, one thing is definitely missing on the Disney replica, two things, actually, and one of those are in the permanent collection of the Museum of Neon Art in Glendale. The neon dragons that were over each side entrance door, we did not recreate, but instead designed an original neon sign or signs that acted as the marquees for the original Great Movie Ride. Here's a look at that spectacular neon marquee for the former Great Movie Ride. Such fantastic letter forms and very evocative of the period, and a great subhead that gives you the idea of what the attraction is about. You're not just going to sit and watch a movie, but be transported into the movies. Now, going back to Hollywood Boulevard, there are some wonderful neons. Like the Chinese Theater, many of the neon signs in Disney's Hollywood studio are recreations of signs you would have seen in Hollywood in the 40s and 50s, and some of them are still standing today. I think we all recognize this one. You can tell the difference between the Disney one and the original because Mickey stands atop the crossroads of the world. You can see in this photo his gloved hand at the top in the picture. And here's a couple more shots. We really use the neon in conjunction with other signage and architecture and music to put you in the period. Very Hollywood. Here we have an example of programmatic architecture and neon prevalent in Los Angeles at that time period. The dark room was a real camera store on the Miracle Mile in 5370 Wilshire Boulevard, Los Angeles. It opened in 1938 or 1935 or 1937, depending on which book or website you want to believe. The 9-foot-tall camera on the original was made of black vitrolite, which is an opaque pigmented glass with clear glass as display windows. The round window in the position of the camera lens echoes the use of round porthole-style windows and other streamlined modern buildings of the 1930s. Here it is used in story, very much as it was used in reality, as a camera store. And here are some more neon signs from Hollywood Boulevard at Disney's Hollywood Studios. A beautiful facade and a nod to the theater where Walt Disney's first full-length feature animated feature played, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Actually premiered at the Carthay Circle. Of course, we like to get our characters into the neon action as well. And here's Mickey looking quite dapper atop this clothier's. And It lights beautifully in yellow. Although these are recreated historic theater facades, most are actually merchandise stores on the inside, but really not much different than if you go down to downtown LA today, you would see the old Tower Theater fully restored and walk inside to discover it is now an Apple store, or the Rialto Theater marquee that's now fronting for an Urban Outfitters. This is based on a real movie theater, the Warner Beverly Hills Theater, that was demolished in the 80s. So this recreated facade lives on at Disney's Hollywood Studios. And here is some of the animation. It's really, really spectacular. And another streamlined modern beauty, inspired by the Academy Theater that was designed by noted theater architect S. Charles Lee. Take a look at this animation. And the rooftop neon spirals is one of my favorites here and at the Academy. The Sunset Boulevard edition added a number of neon theater homages to LA's past, and the Tower of Terror acts as a secondary weenie here, pulling guests down Sunset to the famous attraction themed around an old abandoned Los Angeles hotel. And because neon was used so readily in the 30s through the 50s, even a little sign for an ice cream shop can have some neon in it. And it happens to be right down the street from that Disney landmark I just mentioned. The architecture of the tower was inspired by multiple Southern California landmarks, such as the Biltmore Hotel and the Mission Inn. The neon is intentionally broken and the letters askew because the story is that the hotel has been abandoned since the Great Lightning Storm many years ago. The Museum of Neon Art has one of the original Brown Derby neons in their collection, and this beautiful reproduction sits on top of a restaurant that also recreates the Brown Derby experience, complete with caricatures on the walls around the booths. Spoiler alert, we will see another Brown Derby neon in another Disney park a little bit later. I'm not sure if this one is based on any of the original Brown Derby signages, but if anybody knows, let me know. I love it, no matter what. There really is a lot of secondary neon signage in this park. Because like the real Hollywood of the 40s and 50s, all that neon signage really helps transport you to the period. This building here is based on the California bungalow residential style, as practiced by architects such as Charles and Henry Green. Unlike many of the other buildings at the studios, Sid Cahuenga's One of a Kind is not based on a single actual building, but is faithful to a style and an era. And look at that fantastic neon. Now, let's hop back to California. Where Disneyland's Main Street is set at the turn of the last century during Walt's childhood, Disney California Adventures Main Street, Buena Vista Street, is meant to represent Los Angeles at the time Walt arrived in 1923, which neatly coincides with the timing that neon signage was first appearing in the United States. So we can be greeted with this neon Oswald's gas station, done in a streamlined, modern, and beautiful neon script. And for those who don't know, Oswald is a nod to Walt's first successful animated character, Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. Here's another example of Buena Vista Street neon. We see the building has the 1923 date, the date that marks the start of the Walt Disney Company, hence our recent 100-year celebration, and the beautiful neon letterforms for the candy store. Very different in its look from the Disneyland Main Street Candy Palace with its painted wooden signage. And here's a bit of video to show off the animation for Gone Hollywood. I just love how the two L's nest and the O's are different sizes. So much fun. And here's the full nighttime glow. I love, yeah, I just love those L's. Another of the Hollywood Boulevard neons. This is for Disney Junior. I have been told An old school mechanical unit operates in this theater marquee to give that animation the look and feel of a true vintage sign. And the Hyperion, a nod to the Hyperion Avenue of Walt's original studio with the neon sign on the roof, is an actual theater inside the park. So this marquee is actually giving guests information about times for a live stage show. And here's a tribute to the classic California drive-in restaurants where they would serve you in your car. If you saw the old Mel's in American Graffiti, it's a very similar style. Not only are the neon signs around it, but neon is also used as an architectural element. Between the look and the music and the smell of the burgers and the soda, this place will take you back in time. Now, we may not have made the Chinese theater dragons on the theater in Florida, but we have a very impressive neon dragon that sits atop the Lucky Fortune Cookery Chinese restaurant at the Pacific Wharf, inspired by architecture in Monterey. Across the way, also in the Pacific Wharf, is another fun rooftop neon for our Mexican restaurant. Over at Pixar Pier, which is reminiscent of those seaside amusement parks such as Santa Monica's Pacific Ocean Park, where they would often use garish use of neon to draw people in from the boardwalk for souvenirs. I say this might be based on Santa Monica as it has a Route 66 theme, and Route 66, as many of us know, ends right at the Santa Monica Pier. Back to Disney World. There was a literal tunnel of neon called the Rainbow Corridor that was in the Imagination Pavilion at Epcot from 1982 to 1998. At that time, this was the most neon in one place in any Disney park. It was beloved by guests, and the colors would change as you walked through. What better way to represent the spirit of imagination? And since Paris is considered the birthplace of neon, it makes sense that there was a bit of neon in the France Pavilion at Epcot, and in a lovely Parisian font. Now, speaking of Paris, let's head over to Disneyland Paris. So what differentiates the Paris version of Hollywood from the Disney Hollywood Studios version? Well, where Florida is creating a real street with architecture for you to feel like you're actually back in Hollywood of the 40s, Paris, although using a ton of neon, is not trying to make you believe you've been transported to an actual street in Hollywood. This is a postcard mashup stylized Hollywood that you might find in a Gene Kelly movie. In fact, the whole area of the park sits inside a building made to look like an old soundstage. The architecture is only front-facing, and when you walk through the doors, you see the exposed wood and 2x4s, as if you were on the set of a film that was just about ready to start shooting. A film that must be some sort of homage to Hollywood. So the neon here is meant to evoke a very different feeling than the Hollywood Boulevard in Florida. Shutterbugs, clearly inspired by the dark room, Glamour Girl Cosmetics has the feel of the Max Factor building. And there's that other Brown Derby sign sitting right next to Schwab's Pharmacy in this idealized vision of Hollywood. The scale and proportions are played with here to make any direction you face look iconic, but ultimately not realistic. But who cares? That's Hollywood. Like all our Tomorrowlands, there's an abundance of architectural neon here in Paris. And here's a clever nod to the very American invention for the front of the Hotel Santa Fe at Disneyland Paris Resort. Instead of an ugly parking lot full of cars, the cars take on a role in the story, helping to sell the idea of this being a drive-in movie theater. Even the interior is full of neon as the hotel is immersing the guests in the theme of Route 66 and the American Southwest. Note how they use the fluorescence in the photo on the right as a nod to the broken yellow lines you see along the road. Speaking of neon in hotels, this little neon is a nice addition to the Port Orleans Hotel at Walt Disney World, themed to New Orleans. Okay, here we go. Cars Land. I think I can safely say that Cars Land contains the largest concentration of neon signage inside any Disney theme park. As you all know, the land was inspired by the movie, which in turn was inspired by those little towns along Route 66 that were forgotten and bypassed when the interstates were built. Many of you will recognize the places that inspired the town of Radiator Springs. Now let's hear from a couple of people who actually worked on this amazing land.
There was a lot of inspiration and research for Cars Land. We obviously had the Cars film, but we also had to research Route 66 and the type of signs that might exist on Route 66, be it handmade signs or large metal signs like you see today, including a lot of neon, a lot of hand-worked materials.
We looked at a lot of photos of Route 66, primarily the signage, but also the buildings were really interesting too because the signage would match the buildings a lot of times. If you look at the film, they did a really good job of capturing Route 66. So what we did is we took it a step further and looked at the signs that existed in real life and tried to make those feel like cars as well.
There was definitely a challenge in creating some of the neon signs. A lot of the parts for neon are a lot harder to find now. LED technology is starting to take over. So we tried as hard as we can to go back to the 40s and 50s and use things like glass housings and some of the things that made the neon signs from back then so special.
Mark Pinelli was our lead graphics designer for Cars Land and designed and oversaw the fabrication and installation of all the neon signs in the land. Now, here's a fun fact for you car people. The animated neon spark plug sequence on top of the valve covers shade structures out in front of Flo's V8 Cafe replicates the spark plug firing order of a Ford flathead V8 engine. I have no idea what I just said, but I'm sure the car people do. Here's a look at a little bit of that sequence. I love those kind of Easter eggs though, the detail. This land has a little of everything in terms of styles of neon signs. Pole signs, blade signs, building attachments, skeletal neon, animated neon. A little bit of everything. All the neon was made a year in advance of its installation and stored at Superior Electric, where they fabricated many of the neon signs and then delivered and installed when the site was ready. As Mark said, finding the parts for the neon signs was a challenge. For example, signs of that time period only used glass housings, which can be harder to find today, especially when you're creating 27 massive neon signs at the same time. And of course, they all needed to look period authentic. At the time we were building this land, Mark said, we bought every vintage glass housing in the US for the signs in Cars Land, which speaks to the accuracy of the time period being portrayed. Every detail matters. I think this is one of the only signs in the not in the movie and a late ad. They needed a sign to direct guests to what was then a fast pass distribution, and Mark had to come up with something that gave this information, but also fit perfectly with the aesthetic of the film. And it's a beauty inspired by this one, the Lubarama. In many cases, they painted the returns to match the color of the background of the sign, which I understand is not always done, but helps make the signs look as great in the day as they do at night. The animated details are just so clever. There's Sarge's supply hut and the Lubarama, the curb feeler. So much fun. And the oil pan with its dripping bulb. Neon inside that bulb. I could just stand in front of Ramones for a long time. The tower sign, the skeletal neon attached to the building, the decorative neon, the neon in the windows, and the color combination, just perfection. I think many of the neon sign makers can relate to the challenge of designing and attaching neon to a curved facade. The challenge for our Imagineering designers was that they had to recreate neon signs that originally appeared in an animated movie. And the neon signs in the animated movie did not have to obey the laws of physics. But in our dimensional theme park world, we absolutely had to make these things work in real life and look as they did in the film. And for me, that is one of the greatest achievements of Cars Land and often goes unsung. And how great is it that every night at sunset, there is a crowd that gathers on this street to await the neon lighting event to the song Shaboom. Each sign lights up one right after the other, and if you can be there for that moment, which happens around sunset every night, it's truly magical and a real celebration of the neon signs. So we've come full circle from no neon in the park to an entire land filled with the neon that they celebrate every night. Bringing my presentation to a close is Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. Say that 3 times fast. Which went into the Chinese theater, replacing the great movie ride, as I talked about earlier. That happened in March of 2020. It's hard to believe, but this attraction is actually the first ride in a Disney park themed to Mickey Mouse. Philip Hillis was our lead graphics designer on the project and now the art director for Disney's Hollywood Studios. He designed the marquee to pay tribute to the great and expensive marquees that were custom built for movie premieres at Hollywood theaters like the Chinese used to do. In fact, Kathy Kickert's book, Hollywood Signs, shows some great examples of those huge, magnificent neon signs that were made specifically for whatever movie was playing that week. I have no idea what happened to the signs when the movie's run was over, and it's probably best not to think about it.
This marquee is so important to this attraction because this is Mickey and Minnie's first attraction. And we want to make sure that we're providing an amazing marquee that really celebrates their entrance into a great attraction at Disney's Hollywood Studios. The marquee sets up that you're arriving at the Chinese Theater for a premiere of Mickey and Minnie's Perfect Picnic, the brand new Mickey shorts that will be premiering. We knew from the beginning that we wanted a neon Mickey and Minnie, just because we knew it would be really fantastic to have them animated just like they are inside the attraction as well.
One of the great details about this sign, it was actually the inspiration from it came from the original Chinese theater. And so all of the elements were taken from previous signs that had existed on the building exterior. All of our designers and all of our graphic designers come together and create these really beautiful designs. Shop drawings are created, which we have our engineering partners, our architectural partners, and other designers kind of weigh in. And then a series of 10s to 20s fabricators basically put this sign together part by part, inch by inch, all hand done, and all built here in Central Florida.
We wanted to continue this look of neon all the way down Hollywood Boulevard, but really create this marquee as basically a beacon that you're guided to.
I think it's going to be really great to be able to look straight down the front entryway and to kind of see one of these magical moments as one of the first entry statements of the park, because you're going to be able to see it from the front entry.
I love neon. I love that we have designed this in a way that is uniquely tied to the history of Hollywood and Hollywood Boulevard and that feeling of the golden age of cinema.
And here we can see the animated neon in action. Love all the animation and the play with the bulbs and the neon together. Truly spectacular. Well, thank you for joining me today. It's been a pleasure to do this presentation for the SCA. And I will bring it back.
Thank you so much, Steve, for that presentation. That was unbelievable. It's amazing. It's quite remarkable.
Thank you so much.
We have a bunch of questions for you, but that was, oh my goodness. But I have a question. The little clips that came of the various people speaking about what they've been doing in that, where did those clips come from, or what were they made for?
Oh, we often do behind the scenes videos on all our attractions that that can be used for marketing, that could show up in on Disney Plus and all that kind of thing. we like to, because everybody is interested in how these things get made and how these things are produced. More and more these days, we like to share some of what goes into that and hopefully inspire future Imagineers.
Yes, and I'm sure you will too. Well, we've got a bunch of questions here. Well, let's get started through them. Now, let me see. Well, somebody asked the question. So, and there's kind of some that are sort of related. So, David Peterson says, "How much work does all this neon signage at Disney require?" And then Charles Vignola says, "Are there neon experts on staff, or are a lot of these contracted out for construction and maintenance?"
Yeah, I believe. Well, they definitely have a great maintenance staff who know how to take care of neon signs. I'm sure. I think a lot of the neon experts in terms of like vendors and maintenance are probably I don't know for sure, but are probably contracted out. Though probably depending on the park, it depends.
Okay. And then Kim Rosenberg asks, how much does all this cost? Having weekly, any idea of what the budget is for neon?
I have no, well, I mean, being on the board of the Museum of Neon Art, I know how much, goes into, uh, it's not cheap. I'll tell you that. And of course, building an entire land out of neon, but that's what's so great about, the Disney company. They're willing to spend the money for the authenticity. They're not going to cheap out. They're not going to make that whole. It would have been, way cheaper to make that whole land out of LED. Biting my tongue when I say that, but they didn't do that. They did neon, and they did neon in these other locations because it's right for the time period. And people just know, even if they don't know the difference between, they can't tell you specifically the difference between LED and neon. They can feel the difference. They can sense it. And that authenticity is so important.
Yeah, well, no question about that. And I don't know if Jeremy Ebersol is watching tonight. Jeremy, are you there? Just say something in that chat if you are, because oh my God, don't get him started on neon versus LEDs. It's more than an
Don't get,
obsession. It's
yes.
a crusade almost, It's
I know I am 100% with him on that. 100% with
okay. And as Annie Saunders says, don't get most of us started.
it. Thank you.
She also said, whatever it costs, it's worth it. Now, Ariana Blair says, Masson Blair says, do you expect Disney will continue designing with neon in the future?
Um, if it depends on the project, of course, and what the time period is set in or how the neon will be used. But I don't anticipate we will stop using neon anytime soon, where
Okay.
where it's appropriate.
Can you tell us, Steve, what exactly is your role in all this? What's your contribution?
Well, I am a story lead, and our story department, we are, in the old days you'd call us writers, but we do more than write. We are with the story, and we stay with the story throughout the entire project's life cycle. And a large scale project such as a land or a major ride from start to finish takes about 5 years. So you need to keep a watch on the story. And of course, the story is going to evolve through the course of 5 years because of, all kinds of factors. It's never the first thing you present 5 years at the beginning of, but but it's our job to just keep on top of that story, make sure the story stays true to the vision as adjustments are made along the way. So we write, of course, we write the scripts and the stories. Many times. I think I was in the park one time, and I was introduced as the writer of this project, and this couple who was visiting the park just looked at me and said, "What needs to be written at Disneyland?" And I guess I took that as a kind of backhanded compliment that it was also organic. They didn't think there was any writing, but I did say the animatronics don't make up their own lines. Uh, but but yeah, we do writing story. There's graphics involved. There's, we do show information guides that are essentially the Bible to the story that, because we move on to another job after the thing opens, but that project is going to stay there for, hopefully 10, 15, 20 years. So as new people come in, they can get our vision, and what we intended the story to be, when new people come in.
Okay, that's fascinating. Dia Geary or Jiri says, what would you say is the role the signage plays in the emotional experience or shaping the narrative of the land as opposed to functional decorative signage?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, like, Cars Land, it is just literally you're putting you in that movie, stepping into Route 66 in that time period. Obviously in the Tomorrowland versions of the neon is just meant to be futuristic and make you, give that futuristic feel. It's what's fun about neon is it can play many parts. But and of course the lighting as well. So it's got, it's multi-layered.
Okay. Now, here's an interesting question. William from William Domino. He says, is neon ever used on the Disney cruise ships? Is it even possible to do it?
Yeah, it is possible, and I believe that's a good question. No, I believe there is. Of course, keeping people who are skilled in maintenance on neon on a ship uh, is a challenge. But I'm maybe some of my other Imagineers who are on this can tell me, but I'm pretty sure we have some neon on some of our ships.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, even if it's just for directional signage and that sort of thing.
sure. Yeah.
Annie Saunders says maybe border tubing. I'm not even sure what that means, but border tubing. Now,
I'm not sure either.
yeah, okay.
I want to learn that term though.
Yeah, maybe Annie can tell us what border tubing is.
Yeah.
Bonnie Barber says, I fell in love with neon as a young kid. Do you see kids reacting to the neon in the cars section when it turns on at night?
Absolutely. I mean, you really got to stand there. I mean, it's really amazing. I mean, the parents, of course, bring the kids. Everybody gathers. It's like waiting and watching the fireworks or a parade. They just know they don't even. It's not even listed in the show guides anywhere. You just sort of know, and if you know, you know, or if you're in the land, you start to see people gather, and you ask, and they tell you. And it's so amazing to see, kids literally light up when the signage comes on. And I hope that, it inspires them a love of neon, because we're going to need the next generation to care about neon, because as you know, all around America, neon signs are going down because, of the maintenance and the cost and all that. But where people realize they can make a lot of money selling their sign and then replace it with plastic or LED. So we definitely have a lot less neon in any city than we did, in the 80s and 70s and 60s. So um, if the kids can understand and love, that's why I love seeing, talking to them at the Museum of Neon Art and, showing them these signs that are part of LA history, and also like making them aware, because sometimes you see them come into the museum and they're just using the neon as a backdrop for their selfies. And then when you tell them, that sign's from the 30s, they just look at you and go, "What?" And then you start to tell them about the sign and they get enthralled. So, hopefully we can carry that on.
It's funny that for people that don't grow up with neon, they won't get they won't understand what this classic trope is in movies where the neon sign flashes on up, but there's a buzz to it, and like an old eat sign or something like that.
Right,
I
right.
think that's
I
great.
know. There's something very romantic about that.
Good question. Well, okay, that's all the questions there's tons of comments in here, which you'll see when I send a comment. Well, you have the comments now, but there's lots of them. The people are very, very appreciative of your presentation tonight.
Well, I appreciate everybody taking their time to attend.
Well, I want to thank you again, Steve, and also thank the audience. We had 72 people watching at our peak, which is really good for one of these SCA Zooms. And this is maybe a good opportunity to remind everybody about next month, when on Wednesday, September the 17th at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, we'll join Heather David, author of Motel California, as she takes us on a virtual road trip to mark the 100th anniversary of the first motel. We'll celebrate sparkling blue pools, flashing neon signs, automatic ice machines, and bleached white towels. Now, SCA members will be receiving the relevant details and registration link for the September talk by email. Others can register through the SCA website directly. I'd like to thank all our guests for spending some time with us. If you're not a member of the SCA, expect an email shortly inviting you to join and enjoy all the benefits of membership. And keep in mind that tonight's presentation will be available free of charge to anyone on the SCA's website. They're very efficient, starting usually tomorrow morning. And unfortunately, I did get a few comments in that a couple of people were having problems, they couldn't receive the pictures. Could hear the voice, but no pictures.
Oh, wow.
I think there are only a few like that, and we've kind of tried to track it down. We think the problem's with Zoom, nothing to do with you, Steve. So we'll work with Zoom to make sure that doesn't happen again. But for those that did have technical difficulties, they can watch the recording tomorrow and see exactly the same thing. So you still have an opportunity. Okay, Steve, anything you'd like to say? Final words to the folks at home? Oh, I think you're muted, Steve. Oh, Steve, you're muted. Steve, we can't hear you, Steve. You're muted. Oh, have I got you turned off somehow? Hold on a second. Let me see where you are on here. Okay, more technical difficulties. I don't know what's going on. Anyways, thanks again, Steve. And we will see everybody next month. And I'd like to wish everyone a good night.